Well, congratulations on your matriculation into the Apartment Academy, your Institute of Higher NOI. I'm your host, the Dean of the Apartment Academy, Daniel Cunningham. And the Apartment Academy podcast is the multifamily industry's only operations-focused podcast, which features insights from industry leaders, investors, vendors, and technology providers. So if you invest in multifamily real estate or you're involved in day-to-day on-site operations of apartment buildings, we are your source for efficient operations and maximizing your ROI. Today's podcast was with Donald Davidoff, and Donald's new company, Reba, is a BI platform that does what really others have tried before. Others have homegrown solutions to achieve, and it has been difficult, costly in the past, but so necessary. And that is a visualization of key rental data that helps operators make smart decisions about what to do about their property, what to do about leasing, what to do about marketing, what to do about value add rehabs in order to lift rent, and all kinds of things that become much easier to discern when you have a great BI platform in place. And so if you don't know about BI platforms, this is your day to learn, and welcome to it. Here comes Professor Davidoff. All right. Hello, Professor Davidoff. Welcome to the Apartment Academy. Thanks for joining us today here in our lecture hall.
I really appreciate it, Daniel. Good to be with you.
Yeah, Don, we've known each other for a while, and you've always been at the forefront of what's new and interesting in our business, and we're going to talk today about kind of a company you started a couple years ago, Reba. But first, if you don't mind, I think it's interesting. Your journey here is one of that starts on the operation side and moves through technology. Talk just a little bit about your background, first of all.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm one of the many examples of people who accidentally got into the industry, and then it's like flypaper. It just catches you, and you're in the industry. Just never going to get out of it. So I still think of myself as an outsider, but after 23 years, people tell me I can't do that anymore. So I was originally trained as an engineer. I ended up at a software company that specialized in pricing software, hotels, airlines, etc. That led me to lead the team that built LRO. That was the very first automated pricing and revenue management application in the industry. And after building the V1 of that, I switched sides of the table and was the industry's very first vice president of pricing and revenue management for Archstone, a company I'm sure you remember. It ultimately it became part of the S&P 500. Then it got taken out in a go private deal by Tishman Speyer and Lehman Brothers at exactly the wrong time for them. The right time for our shareholders, but the wrong time for them. And ultimately, Equity in Avalon Bay took it out in a private purchase deal back in 2012. So I spent 10 years at Archstone. I spent a year actually at Holiday Retirement in senior living, and then ran a consulting company for a number of years and started real estate business analytics a couple years ago, as you said.
And what was the impetus for starting the company? When I met you, your focus, at least from my perspective, your focus had been, you were very heavy into talking about leasing and leasing strategies, and like that was a big part of your consultative work. So tell us a little bit about the inspiration to start this kind of company.
Yeah. So, I did focus, as you say, on the top line, right? Sort of high impact projects for the C-suite, but on the revenue side. So pricing, revenue management, sales performance improvement, marketing, other things very much related to leasing. We actually did a fair bit of business intelligence consulting. My BI journey started back with LRO. When I joined Archstone, my originally day-to-day customer, and then my sort of right hand, my number one lieutenant, a gentleman by the name of Chris Brust, he and I quickly figured out that to run pricing well, you needed to take data from two different systems of record, from the PMS and from the RMS, and bring them together into one single source of truth. So he built our very first data mart at Archstone back in 2002, 2003. By 2007, it had expanded to a full data warehouse, and he got promoted out from under me. to run BI overall at Archstone. And when Archstone went away, he and another gentleman, Lanny Grossi, who did all the DB work, the two of them started a bespoke BI company called Reluminous. They built Avalon Bay's BI. They designed Invitation Homes. With me, we actually did Irvine Apartments BI and Progress Residential. So now to get to the crux of your question, after building a half a dozen bespoke BI systems, we recognized, 90% of the data model is the same. Rental housing's rental housing. And so the impetus behind Repa was, well, why should somebody have to spend $2 to $3 million in 2 to 3 years just to get to V1 of a bespoke BI platform? What if we could make a data model available on a subscription basis, and people could have really strong contemporary business intelligence platforms with much less time to get up and running, and again on a subscription basis, so not having to spend millions up front. That really was the genesis of the whole thing.
The idea of a BI platform in our business is in multifamily still relatively new. I'll say. So maybe can you give the listeners an understanding of what it means? What's the purpose of a BI platform? What does BI mean? So we've got some context about things we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So business intelligence is all about bringing data together to make business decisions smarter and faster, right? So make better decisions, smarter decisions, and do it faster. We're all very used to reporting, but what a good business intelligence platform does is it creates or presents, dashboards that provide a lot more information, more contextually than just simple reports. And what I learned long ago, even in my pricing days, is if I can control what operators see, how they view their world through their reports and dashboards, then I can have a lot more influence on how they behave. And so good BI lets the heads of the operations group, the heads of other departments, really orient people to what they need to see in order to spend their time most efficiently. Another piece of BI is by having all that data together, it allows you to start engaging in concepts like predictive analytics. So instead of just showing the what and the why, you can also then begin to build some algorithms that look into the future. So for example, one of the dashboards we built that is a form of predictive analytics is we show what the conversion ratios are recently. So what's our lead to visit ratio, our visit to lease, our lease to move in ratios, and then allow the user to do what if analysis around different ratios to get to a different occupancy. So let's say I'm at 94% occupancy right now and I want to get to 95 and I want to get there in 6 weeks. So I enter 95% in 6 weeks and I either set my conversion ratios to the same as what I've been doing recently, or maybe I think I'll do a little better, or I want to see what happens if I do a little worse. And the system can quickly calculate based on all the data, well, here's how many leads you will need to get there. And here's how that compares to what your recent lead velocity has been. Is that realistic? Will you have to invest more to get there, etc.? So a marketing or an operating user can interact with their dashboard, not just look at data, but actually say, well, what if this? What if that? Here's what that means in terms of what I'll need to do marketing-wise to get to that goal.
And Don, what's so hard about this? Why does it cost upwards of, you just mentioned $2 million for a bespoke BI platform? Like, what makes this so difficult?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, IT labor is not cheap these days. So, if you're spending a wrap cost of a couple $100,000 per person, for developers and people like that, it doesn't take that big a team before the costs start coming up. But in terms of the complexity, it's very easy to state sort of what we want a system to do, but to actually get the data modeling right, and then to get the ETLs. ETL is a acronym for extract, transform, load. So that's the piece of software, the middleware, that extracts data from a system, be it a PMS, could be Leonardo 24/7, could be a reputation management platform, any system of record, right? It extracts that data, transforms it into a format that can be viewed along with other data, and then loads that into the BI platform. So if you think about Like our system right now, we have something like 367 metrics and over 267 dimensions. So that's got to be modeled. It's got to be coded. All these tables have to be built. All the processes to get data from a system of record into that platform need to be built. And to be candid, without trying to pick too much on the PMS vendors, their data models can be somewhat obtuse at times, and it can take a lot of trial and error to get the data correct and to transform it correctly. So it ends up building up a lot of hours, and you need pretty sophisticated people. So we're not talking about $50 an hour kind of people doing this. It's just very expensive. It's a lot of work to slog through.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I obviously, from given my the businesses that I've started, I'm a big believer in finding best of breed software, not rolling your own. It's very difficult and expensive. But you saw the problem and you're like, okay, so enter Reba. What were you going to do better? What would you guys do differently?
Sure. So before Reba, people basically had, sort of three choices. I can live in Excel hell, right? Excel hell is this stage many of us are in where we have, I like to call them spread marts, right? It's not just spreadsheets. I don't have a true data mart, but I've got spreadsheet on top of spreadsheet. You've got your spreadsheet. I've got my spreadsheet. I actually store some information, maybe even capture some history myself to have it. And so you get all these interconnected spreadsheets. At first, they give more capability, but then you end up in a situation where like one report has 4 different occupancies, right? It gets very complex coordinating all this stuff. So Excel hell is pretty painful. You could build your own bespoke. We talked about that already. Very expensive, very time consuming. And candidly, the third choice, the existing off the shelf, I use air quotes, BI solutions, they're really fairly constrained. So if I use one of those existing report engines, absolutely that's better than nothing. It gives me access to some consolidated data, gives me some preset dashboards, but it doesn't have the solutions that were there before Reba didn't have the kind of flexibility to build whatever you want, customize it however you want, the way a bespoke system did. So our aspiration, what we think we do different and better than anybody else, is give a bespoke quality experience without having to make a bespoke investment. One of the key ways we do that is we've separated the data layer from the visualization layer. So we're all in on the Microsoft stack. So we're using Azure, we're using SSAS. Those of you who know BI geek out on that. If you don't know that and you're listening, don't worry, that's just the tool set for the application set for the BI platform. And then we're using Power BI for the visualization. So all of our dashboards are built in Power BI. Well, what's cool about that is we can choose, and we do choose, to give that source code, what's called the PBIX file, to our customers. So when a customer is using Reba, out of the box, they've got our 50 plus dashboards. They can hit the ground running. But I learned long ago, trying to come up with one set of dashboards for even just one company is a fool's errand. Everybody wants something different. So to try to come up with one set of dashboards for the industry, we don't even pretend to do that. We come up with a good core set of product dashboards, and then the customer can take it, use it as is, use it as a template, modify it, switch things up. I want some other metric here, not that one. I want this to be a graph, not a table, or a table, not a graph. I want this to be bigger, those to be smaller. All those changes easily customizable in minutes using Power BI, or build new ones from scratch. So that complete customizability, configurability on the front end, I think makes us very unique. And then the other thing we give is direct access to the database through Excel. So 95 to 99% of users are going to use the pre-published dashboards. But who's that data geek, that data jock that the COO turns to when she needs a good answer, right? And an existing dashboard doesn't provide it. That data person, that Excel jock usually, can actually access the entire warehouse and do ad hoc analysis on any dimension, any metric that's in the warehouse. That's a bespoke quality experience. That's what we had at Archstone with our bespoke system. That's what Chris and Lanny built for Avalon Bay. By the way, I mentioned Chris and Lanny because they're my other 2 co-founders. So that's what Avalon Bay had. That's what Irvine has. That's what anybody who builds a bespoke system has. So we want Reba users to be able to have that ad hoc analysis capability as well.
So a Microsoft user now could go to Power BI and build these things themselves. The advantage of Reba is you've already pre-built a number of these dashboards already, and the database connection side. That's obviously the difficult part of this.
Yeah, so a few things. First of all, the connection to get the data from the system of record, like a Yardi or a RealPage or whatever, and normalize it and get it into a set of metrics and dimensions that are easy to process. That data modeling and data extract work is a massive endeavor that we've already done that work. Okay, so an interesting thing about Power BI, you can take Power BI and point it to any data source you want. And some people do this. In fact, I was reading an article, a blog the other day, where this guy was writing about how, you can take Power BI and you can point it to multiple data sources, and you can basically create a mini warehouse within Power BI and operate on it. But the problem is you have to do that for every single dashboard. So for a small number of dashboards, that might work. But when you're trying to scale an enterprise BI, you don't want to do all that work inside of Power BI because you have to repeat it for every single dashboard. What you really want to do is still build a classic warehouse, right? So despite Power BI's flexibility, that flexibility is a strength, but a strength overdone is a weakness. If you overdo it, it actually becomes complex. It's its own version of Excel hell. So instead, what you want to do with a really enterprise dashboard or enterprise BI platform is still create that data warehouse that normalizes. Let's just even take data like occupancy, right? Does occupancy include down units or not? A model unit, is that 0 for 1 or is it 0 for 0, right? Is it like a walk in baseball? It doesn't count in the batting average? Or does it count as 0 for 1 in terms of occupancy? If you try to do everything in Power BI, you have to set that definition every single time. If you build a warehouse where that ETL I mentioned before does that for you, we have decided that models just don't count. They're neither numerator nor denominator. Well, that's built into occupancy. And so now every time you build a new dashboard or a new report, you grab occupancy, that definition is already there. Okay? If you're trying to build it only in Power BI, you have to keep maintaining all those definitions. And that works at small scale. It doesn't work at large scale.
Is that something that's user configurable as well? That the definition of occupancy, for example? Yeah.
No, that's a really good point, because some of the off-the-shelf solutions prior to Reba, they made that decision for you. So I'll actually use another example, renewal percentage. One of the popular systems, if it's showing you a renewal percentage, it includes early terminations. And if you're trying to understand turnover, that's great. It should include early terminations. But if you're trying to understand how is my renewal strategy working, well, early terminations have nothing to do with renewal strategy, right? Only thing that matters for renewal strategy is when you get to a renewal. So a good BI platform actually offers both and allows people allows users who are creating dashboards or reports to pick which one they want. Because depending on the purpose of my report, I may want early terminations included, or I may want early terminations excluded. Same thing with model units. I may want them included, I may want them excluded. And so a good BI platform gives the user the flexibility to configure, like you said, right? To pick one or the other, depending on which purpose they're having.
Sounds like you take a pretty deep dive then at setup, or maybe you have sort of an out of the box look. Hey, here's our best practices. If you want to do something different, you can do something different. But talk a little bit about the effort it takes to get set up with Reba.
That is a time when there's a fairly heavy effort on the customer's part. But before then, the two major things that have to happen, right? One is we have to work with the IT team to get the data connections in place. So we have, scripts and packages and things to make that as simple as possible, but it takes a little bit of work on the IT team. And then the other you mentioned is relates to the business side. So on the business side, you're absolutely right. We do have a sort of out of the box factory settings. Here's how, here's what is included or not included in occupancy. Here's how renewals work, a host of other analogous parameters, if you will. Part of the implementation then is the implementation manager is going to go through with the business leader. Here's all the things that are configurable. Here's how we have them in the factory setting. Here's why that's the factory setting. But if you want to change that definition or configure it differently, now's your chance to do that. I mean, they can always do it later on as well, but it's better to get it right the first time. So there is a period a set of meetings. It's not tens of hours, but there's a couple of hours of reviewing the setup and making conscious decisions whether to accept the factory setting or want to do something a little different.
Got it. Well, talk to us about post setup. You're up and running. What are some of the aha moments that you can expect to have once you've got a properly configured BI platform at your disposal?
Yeah, I think there's two categories of aha moments. The one that's probably more frustrating, but it's still a win, is a good business intelligence platform um, surfaces all sorts of data anomalies. So you find that there are some data governance issues on how you fix those anomalies. Like you would be surprised, or maybe with your background, Daniel, having done this before, you wouldn't be so surprised that today's PMS, you can still find leases where the move out was before the move in, right? Or you have negative days on market, or things that they're just physically wrong. Somebody fat fingered a data element, and for some reason the system of record didn't capture or catch that it had to be a mistake. So, one of the ahas is you get a sense of, oh, here's how clean or not clean my data is, and here's what we do to fix that. More in the true ROI range, you learn stuff about your business you didn't know. Our first customer, we turned them on in the middle of the COVID pandemic and the early days of it, and we saw that the studio occupancies were plummeting compared to the ones, twos, and threes. And the conventional wisdom was that the threes would be a problem because families would want to, get out of Dodge and find more space. At first, we thought we just turned it on. Wow, we must have a bug. We checked into it. Nope, our data was correct. And sure enough, the studios, particularly in San Francisco and also New York, were really suffering. That gave the company advance warning so they could do some things marketing wise, pricing wise, to try to help stem that tide, even to the degree that, okay, that was just the market's doing it. There's nothing we can do about it. Imagine the difference of being able to proactively let your stakeholders know, right? Your board or your owners, your clients, whatever. Hey guys, here's what we're seeing, and this is going to take a while to fix itself out, as opposed to doing a postmortem when one of them is asking, why are you having problems? So that was one example where they could proactively manage the messaging. Another very direct ROI, we have a partnership with Ingrain. And I don't know if for any listeners that don't know who Ingrain is, they've been doing kiosks for many years, and they're kind of the kings of visual mapping of buildings, units, floors, etc. So with our partnership with Ingrain, they actually give all of our customers a couple of free Ingrain maps for each community so that you can see key metrics, not just in a dashboard or report, but literally in a 3D visualization of your property.
No, that's very interesting.
We had one client. It's really, really cool. I mean, anybody who wants to get a demo of it, it's quite sexy. We love showing it off. One of our customers using that, they were doing a lease up, happened to be a high rise, and they noticed very quickly that one of the, they were just looking at occupancy, right, which at that point is 100 or 0, right, the unit's occupied or not, as it's leasing up. And they looked at the visual representation and they noticed one of their stacks was a third leased up when everybody else was just starting to lease, or all the other units just starting to lease. They wondered what's going on there. They found out that they had left out a $500 amenity. Oops. The market, seeing a price with a $500 amenity not included, was jumping at it. And so they were able to fix that when they were a third leased up, instead of waiting till the whole thing was leased up and they were looking backwards, suddenly going, WTF, we didn't get this amenity on this unit. So they literally 2/3 of that stack got the $500 amenity that was otherwise missing. Without the BI platform, they would have missed it.
Wow, that's cool. So those are a couple good ROI examples. Are there any, maybe there's not a direct ROI with these, but what are the other most commonly used data visualizations that you see implemented?
Yeah, I mean, one of our more popular ones is a scorecard that lets you quickly see several key metrics like lease trade outs, occupancy, availability, and sort of red, green, yellow it. So you can use the scorecard to prioritize where you want to put your efforts. Your marketing people, your operating people can both look at the places that need the most help first, quickly identify that. We've actually created a new metric we call weeks of supply. So weeks of supply takes availability and it divides it by the trailing 3-week net lease average. So, if I told you that a property was at 8%, is that good or bad? Well, most people would say 8%'s starting to get a little scary. But if I told you that it was leasing so fast that it was only 4.5 weeks of supply, you'd go, well, that's not a problem at all then. And so, exposure availability can start to scare people when it shouldn't, because there's plenty of leasing going on. Or on the other hand, if it's 8% with very little leasing, so that's really 16 weeks of supply, then it should scare you. So that metric of week supply is something we invented to help people more quickly understand whether an availability was actually good or bad, right? Availability is kind of a results indicator. We happen to be 8% available. Week supply is more of a performance indicator. How are we doing in terms of where we want to be going forward? So that, has helped people know when to put attention or when to, don't worry about it. Let the prices keep rising. Yeah, that's a little high availability, but we're leasing great.
Yeah, that's spoken like a good LRO executive. Don't worry.
There you go.
Pricing will rise, or pricing will adjust accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, if week supply starts to rise because leasing drops off, pricing's going to flatten and even go down if it has to. Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there, Don, would you say there's a sweet spot for the size of an organization before they really can benefit or should consider deploying a BI platform?
I've always thought that the sort of cutoff, anything above about 8,000 units, and you really need good BI. I will tell you, 2 of our first 10 customers are under 5,000 units. So as I've gotten to talk with them and learn a little bit more, certainly the larger you are, the more imperative it is. But I've kind of learned that it's less about a pure size cutoff, and it's more about kind of the sophistication of how the CEO and the COO want to operate their business. And in that context, there are 5,000 unit portfolios that really need BI, and maybe some larger ones that if they're not as into data-driven decision making, maybe a little smaller. But certainly the larger you are, the more imperative it is.
And if on one end of the spectrum is a $2 million bespoke BI platform, how's the SaaS model here work? What sort of cost will people incur to deploy Reba?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We do a per unit per month, kind of pricing. It's depending on the size of the portfolio. It's anywhere from, I'll say, as low as 50 cents to as much as maybe $1 per unit per month. We do have a minimum monthly fee. I mean, honestly, as a startup, and for the amount of effort it takes to set something up, because all that IT setup, whether it's 2 properties or 200 properties, is about the same amount of setup work. So we do typically have a minimum $5,000 a month, and go from there. Really, really large companies, if you've got 100,000 units, 200,000 units, maybe even 50 cents seems too high. So then you kind of have a national account situation. But the vast majority of people are paying 60 to 80 cents per unit per month.
Got it. So we're running up against our sort of our end of our time. If Don, if somebody was considering a BI platform, or how should, what guidance? Let me phrase this way: what guidance would you give to people to say whether or not it's time for them to look into this, and what resources are out there for them to understand BI platforms better?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of resources. If you just Google BI, there's all sorts of blogs out there. I'd encourage people, go to getreba.com, so GETREBA.com. Just go to our resource center. We have a couple of white papers there that I think are very informative about what to think about, what to care about. You can also read some of our past blogs. In terms of, what would indicate that maybe you ought to be thinking about this. If you have metrics that have different numbers in multiple reports, the classic one is occupancy, right? If 3 different reports have 4 different occupancies on them, you probably, now I feel like Jeff Foxworthy, you need a BI platform, right? The old, you might be a redneck, you might need a BI platform. Maybe we'll do something like that.
Yeah, you might need BI.
So definitely, if that's happening, if you're doing postmortems, right? If you're analyzing why something went wrong so that you can learn how to avoid it in the future, instead of finding it quicker, you probably need a BI platform. I'll go back to that lease up example, right? If I'm doing a post-mortem on how did we miss out $500 on 30 floors, right? As opposed to we noticed it 5 or 6 leases in because it was leasing so fast, that would be another indication if you need it. Another thing that I've seen that's very interesting, it's always been hard. I'm on a 20-year mission to try to figure out how to help somebody who doesn't have BI understand the value of it. And it's really, really difficult. I've talked to many COOs that don't have it, and it's always hard bringing it to life. That said, what's interesting is every COO or CEO I know who, for whatever reason, got to a point where they had a good BI platform, and they left that job and went to another company that didn't have a BI platform, BI all of a sudden was immediately their number 1 or number 2 priority. So if you've had it and you suddenly don't have it, you just feel like you're flying blind, and it's a super, super high priority. And so that really is an indication of how valuable it is, even though it's kind of hard to articulate to somebody who's never had it.
Yeah. The ROI can be perhaps difficult to define sometimes, but hard to go back once you've got it in place. Yeah.
It really is.
Donald,
because,
best of luck. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Say it again.
Go ahead. Sorry. I was saying it really is. It really is true what you were saying, that it can be hard to define, but once you've got it and you realize all the ways you're just making better decisions, you never want to turn it off.
Yeah. Well, Donald, best of luck growing the company. It sounds like you're off to a great start. It's definitely an idea whose time has come. Personally, I think if you're a sophisticated operator, I'm not sure why you would want to run buildings without using some level of BI to understand sort of true operations. So I definitely endorse the concept, and I'm sure with your industry experience and connections, the business will grow quickly. Thanks for joining us today and talking to everybody about what BI means, so that they can join the wave. And we'll see you at our Apartment Live coming up down in San Diego.
Absolutely. And thanks so much for having me, Daniel. Look forward to seeing you and catching up. It's great that we can be in person again. Looking forward to San Diego.
Sure is. Thanks, Don. Well, that is a wrap with today's lecture from our elbow patch festooned professor of multifamily science. We appreciate you logging in and listening again today. If you enjoy these podcasts and you feel like your management company could use a little advice from some of the professors here at the Apartment Academy, then go to our website, apartmentacademy.com, and click Help Me. We'll send you a questionnaire and provide individualized responses to your answers at no charge that I guarantee will offer you insights on ways you can immediately improve apartment operations. Until next time, my office hours are posted, and we'll see you in the classroom.